Dragons, like many other high-tier combat monsters in the most recent patch, had a little bit of a change in that many of them got slightly less defense for slightly more attack, right? So basically what that means, they're more likely to get hits, while themselves being also more likely to take hits, right? And has that affected them in a pretty significant way? It's interesting. Dragons were already in an interesting place in the meta before, in that they can be very, very strong, and Imric, I would say, kind of stat-wise, purely, is probably the strongest dragon in the game. Base, I mean, 74 attack, 56 defense, almost 600 weapon strength. Of course, he's got plenty of great abilities as well. Lord of Dragons, for an enemy single target, just to nuke them. Nuke their melee attack and defense stats map-wide. Melee attack, Starlance, of course, imbues Flambolt, which gives him just a 22% damage spike, as well as extra weapon damage, charge speed, and 50% charge bonus, which he already has 50, right? So that puts him up to 75 charge bonus. Absolutely wild. He is very expensive, though, obviously. Only 80 armor, and 7,000 HP is basically, or 6,000 rather, a little over 6,000, is kind of the best you can get from a dragon. I mean, healing notwithstanding, but it's interesting, you know, having that less melee attack definitely means that they take more incidental hits from lower tier units, and that can be a little bit of an issue. Here we've got Rider of Rohan. I should specify, this is not me. A lot of people get mistaken. This is a community replay from Rider of Rohan here, one of my patrons. He's got Imric, 5 White Lions, some Spears. We've got a Lore Master of Hoeth here for the caster, very cool choice. Some Archers. Illyrian Reavers out to the flank, up against a foul horde of Skaven. Icket Claw with a couple of Poison Wind Mortars. Packmaster on loan from Clan Molder. A few Rat Ogres with them as well. A bunch of Clan Rats, Wolf Rats, and yeah, typical chaff. As we get started here, though, you'll notice that this Skaven army does have a pretty distinct lack of anti-large tools, direct anti-large tools, right? I mean, you do have the Council Guard here, who are really more of a defensive unit than kind of a counter monster unit. Even after the changes, they do okay. They just really don't have the best stats in the world, a lot of them. But Storm Vermin in terms of stats for high tier infantry are just not great. Mortars, you can see, lighten up that back line of archers. Meanwhile, they're still firing in, and yeah, so right now the mortars are more or less firing with impunity, which is going to be a problem in the long run. They definitely will tear through, but the question is, how long can the line hold? Will Rider of Rohan be able to break through before they do just annihilate his own whole army? Because that's often what it comes down to in this matchup, unfortunately, and with a lot of matchups, Elves especially against the Skaven. Here you can see the quick tear route from Imric, and granted, a lot of other flying monsters could do this for a lot cheaper, but Imric, because he has personally such high melee defense, and also has access to pretty good healing, I mean, granted, you can't take him with a top tier caster because you don't have a hero level kind of top tier caster, but even just a Lore of Life, or like this Lore Master of Hoeth does have Earthblood, right? And against factions that generally have lower melee attack and defense, Imric, because his stats are so good for a dragon, that 56 defense is pretty high. He can shrug off a lot of that damage, just not even take it in the first place, right? Have less chance to be hit, which is really ideal. Wolf Rat's kind of swarming around the flank here. A lot of the cav and other stuff, this flank been broken up pretty hard by the mortars, but yeah, the mortars, one of them, it looks like, just got wrecked by those Reavers. White Lions also in support there. Now the other mortars getting engaged. Probably will be bailed out by these spears, although those spears probably won't actually beat the Reavers. Some more models kind of flowing in there on the side. But Imric's just kind of taking his time, dropping on whatever isolated targets and terrifying them away, using that terror to his advantage. And, you know, other dragons, it's interesting. I really haven't done a lot of testing, but like Kolek, for example, like the Tomb King's Constructs, there were quite a few monsters that had that treatment. If you go back and look at the most recent patch notes, they had, like, just less defense, more attacks, slightly, all of them, pretty much. There was some other kind of minor fine-tuning. Yeah, Imric coming in with a nice VTOL breath. Let's get in close for this. Haven't really been getting too many cinematics in this one so far, but Icket calls down a nice Warp Lightning. Icket is on his tricycle, it should be mentioned, his motorbike, which is pretty cool. Not the best, but it's decent because it is a pretty small hitbox. But here comes Imric Starlance is up and active, which means, yeah, Ikit's going to have a pretty bad time here. I mean, granted, the stagger animations can be an issue. Let's get in and watch close. The biggest issue in many people's eyes is the dragon's cost and the fact that they seem to be a little bit harder to use, which is true. You just have to be a little bit more careful about when and where you charge in. Always make sure you know how you're going to escape, and sometimes the dragon's attack animations push them deeper into a blob, which is definitely a problem. Like here, Imrik's getting somewhat locked down, thankfully again, because he personally has such high defense. His Rat Ogres, they are juiced up currently with Shock Collars, so they're actually going to be able to do some damage, but there's only a handful of them there, right? Council Guard, only 32 attack. Their bonus versus large isn't huge either, so they're going to have like maybe a 25% chance to hit or so. Yeah, 17 bonus versus large, yeah. 35%, which is pretty close to the base, I should say, or close to 35. Yeah. He's going to be able to get away here, and this is kind of the thing, again, if you don't have the mass to stop dragons up, and in many cases now Skaven do, but they still largely lack like cavalry and other things. Even then, cavalry can often get hit hard and terrified away because dragons do enough weapon damage that they can kind of one-shot cavalry models. They're pretty close to it. So it's an interesting interaction. You know, where do they stand in the meta? Currently, it's hard to say. Yeah, Imrik is, for the time being, just chasing Ikit off, which is totally fine. The rest of the army is pretty tattered, but check out this Lore Master of Hoeth, still completely healthy. 60 melee defense with that evasion active, and with his martial prowess active again against kind of a chaff, horde-oriented army that doesn't have good melee attack and defense stats kind of as a base. Lore Master will be able to shine there. He's also been dumping some Earthbloods, no doubt, into himself. If we can grab his card again. Come here, buddy. Oh, yeah. Nope, that's the Spearman. Okay, here we go, Lore Master. Yeah, it's actually regened about, 700 HP, which is super solid just from successive Earthbloods. What's that, like 2 Earthbloods on himself? Also probably hitting these White Lions and some of these other supporting units as well. So Imrik at this point, just the fact that he's so healthy and he's so much on the balance of power, the Skaven have just kind of lost. We'll take a look at the value at the end, but Imrik himself just getting good, smart, clean charges, and that's really the thing. And one of the reasons why, especially in like the highest levels of play, it can be tricky to use dragons sometimes, because players will be able to react and catch you, basically, to have units to countercharge in and trap you in place. It can be tricky there, but even still, in the right scenario against the right opponent in the right build, there's a lot of variables, but you can certainly use dragons to good effect. This is one matchup I would say where, again, you wouldn't think to bring a dragon here because Skaven have lockdown tools, and even Ikit himself, I didn't see if he was using that Howling Warpgale there. It didn't seem like it. But they have tools to shoot you out of the sky at the very least. They didn't really have any here, though, which is a thing, you know, you might think, oh, people wouldn't take a dragon in this matchup, so I don't necessarily need to have the tools to deal with it. But then someone does, and then you have a big problem. And that's the beauty of this game, is there's kind of rock, paper, scissors in that way. And it wouldn't be too hard to kind of give this build some insurance against dragons from the Skaven perspective. Really, you could swap out one of the mortars for Rattling Gun, or just find a way to bring some slingers in this. It wouldn't be too hard to maybe swap some clan rats out. Slingers I find to be, the Skaven Slave Slingers, very cost effective in that they are so cheap, especially in that many numbers. Something, I mean, 80 armor is pretty decent, but it'll still take some damage from them. And in that many numbers, with that big of a hitbox, you can make contact on enough missiles that you get some good value that way. Again, Jezzails or Rattling Guns, of course, would be viable options, potentially as well. But you would be thinning out your line a little bit, and that's an issue for Skaven. You do need to have those summons, Clan Rat summons, kind of as a rule sometimes to give you the numbers here. Taking a look at the damage value, Imrik, though, carried hard. Even with how expensive he is, he did pay for himself, which is pretty impressive. 11,000 damage dealt. Lore Master also, just in terms of damage, probably paid for himself. I forget how much he costs, but also getting some healing in, which is not represented there. Spearman kind of getting killed. The White Lions didn't do great, to be honest. One of them only paid for themselves, but it's more the fact that they're here, they're tanky enough, and have good enough leadership that they can kind of hang around till this late game. You can see that the Wood Elf, or the High Elf army, it looks a lot more tattered if you kind of look at the Skaven, like, they got away with a lot of numbers, and that's just kind of Skaven leadership for you. Again, the terror of Imric is pretty real. There's some other interactions with the leadership, too, that maybe I'll talk about in another video. How Imric, him being so much stronger than the other units, actually gives them leadership debuffs when he's nearby. Yeah, a 1,500 damage value, though, on the one Illyrian Reaver that came in and shut down the 2 Poison Wind Mortars. Beautifully done there. Basically, I may not have saved in the game. I don't know. Imric might have still been able to carry in the late game, but without any support units at all, it's a lot less likely for sure. Because then Ikit can kind of just sit on top of these halberds, cycle charge him if there's any rat ogres around. Yeah. Speaking of rat ogres, let's take a look here. They basically all did pay for themselves, except for the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep, which is unfortunate. Wolf Rats also did a good job cleaning up some units. Both paid for themselves. The Mortars, one of them actually did not pay for itself, which is very surprising. You rarely see that. This one definitely did. Council Guard, they're alright. They're a decent choice. They actually got some pretty good damage value in, which is okay, but even with the buffs to halberds, I'd say probably Storm Vermin with halberds are still not worth it. They're maybe the worst halberd unit in the game now. That's kind of a hot take, but we'll see. Clan Rats also. The Clan Rats with shields are just kind of here. I would say exchanging these guys out for more chaff, especially chaff with slings, would be better, I think. Yeah, because none of them really did anything of value. Ikit, though, 800 damage value is decent. Decent. Again, though, on the Doom Wheel, you have terror, and this build does lack any form of terror, which is not... yeah, you wouldn't think against the High Elves they have good enough leadership, but in fact, I would say terror against any non-undead faction is you at least want one unit that causes terror, or the ability to summon it, or, you know. So taking Ikit on the Doom Wheel would be more expensive, make him a bigger target, certainly, but he does get more HP, also causes terror, and gets that sweet missile attack as well, which is actually does a ton of damage. Could help take down Imric if he kind of kites him around on the ground, but anyway... That's a discussion for another time. Let me know how you guys feel about dragons in the comments. What's been your experience using them? You know, what results have you seen? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the subject. Imric did a good job here, but yeah, I'm going to be trying him and others more out myself. You guys may have seen, I think I put up one with a Chaos Dragon Lord in the past month or so. I don't remember. A lot of replays. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe, all that jazz. We'll see you next time.